The research station floated in the darkness of space, its lights blinking against the black void. Inside, Chief Navigator Zelthor studied the readings on his screen with growing excitement. After months of scanning this sector, they had finally found something interesting. The planet appeared on his display as a blue and green sphere. It had water, lots of it. The atmosphere contained nitrogen and oxygen. There were land masses with what looked like settlements scattered across them. Zelthor's long fingers moved across the controls, pulling up more data. The Zalothian Empire had been exploring space for 12,000 cycles. They had found and colonized 47 different star systems. Their technology allowed them to create gateways between worlds, portals that let them travel instantly across vast distances. It was how they had built their empire so quickly. Zelthor sent his report to Commander Vexnar, who ran the entire exploration division. Within hours, he received a response. The commander wanted a full analysis. He wanted to know if this world was worth opening a gateway to. The science team worked for 3 days straight. They measured everything they could from orbit. The planet had a gravity rating of 1.2, which was higher than most civilized worlds. The oxygen content in the air was at 21%, which seemed dangerously high. The temperature swings between day and night were extreme. On their scale, this world rated as Class 7 for habitability. Class 7 meant it was barely suitable for life. Most Zalothians would need environmental suits to survive there. But the scans showed the planet was rich in minerals and had abundant water. More importantly, the native population appeared primitive. Their largest settlements had only a few million inhabitants. Their technology seemed limited to basic machines and simple communications. Commander Vexnar approved the gateway construction. He had done this hundreds of times before on other primitive worlds. The procedure was always the same. Open a gate, make contact with the natives, assess their level of development, and then decide whether to relocate them or integrate them into the empire. Either way, the resources of the planet would belong to the Zalothian Empire. The construction team arrived in massive cargo ships. They brought the gateway components, huge metal rings inscribed with complex patterns that focused dimensional energy. The lead engineer, a female named Sixara, oversaw the assembly in orbit above the planet. They chose a landing site carefully. The sensors identified a region with low population density, but close enough to a settlement for easy contact. The area had flat terrain and open spaces. It was perfect for their needs. Sixara guided the construction with practiced efficiency. The gateway rings were positioned and locked into place. Power cores were installed and activated. Energy conduits were connected in precise patterns. The whole process took 6 planetary rotations, which the natives apparently called days. On the 6th day, Sixara activated the gateway for the first time. The metal rings hummed with power. A shimmer appeared in the center, like heat waves rising from hot ground. Then the shimmer solidified into a stable portal. A window connecting this world to the Zalothian staging area 3 star systems away. The gateway stood 15 meters tall, a towering ring of alien metal in the middle of a wheat field in Montana. Through it, the golden grass of Earth was visible on one side, and the purple sky of the Zalothian staging world was visible on the other. Commander Vexnar reviewed the final reports with satisfaction. Everything had gone according to plan. The gateway was stable and operational. Scout teams were ready to make first contact. The nearest native settlement was only 3 of their miles away, a small town with about 8,000 inhabitants. What Commander Vexnar did not know, what none of the Zalothians understood, was what Class 7 really meant. They had rated dozens of worlds as Class 7 before. To them, it simply meant the conditions were harsh and uncomfortable. They would need protective gear and environmental controls. But in the wider galaxy, among species who actually studied Deathworlds, Class 7 meant something terrifying. It meant a planet where everything was trying to kill you, where the gravity crushed bones, where the oxygen corroded metal and burned lungs, where the native life forms were aggressive and dangerous, where the weather could kill in minutes. Earth was a death world. It had spawned life in the most brutal conditions imaginable. Ice ages had come and gone. Asteroid impacts had wiped out entire species. Diseases had ravaged populations. Predators had hunted prey across every continent. And through it all, one species had not just survived, but thrived. Humanity had evolved in competition with creatures 10 times their size. They had learned to hunt in packs, to make tools, to plan and strategize. They had conquered every environment on their planet, from frozen poles to burning deserts. They had survived diseases that should have killed them. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years, constantly improving their weapons and tactics. The Xylothians had never encountered anything like humanity. In their empire, conflicts were rare and usually resolved through negotiation. Their worlds were peaceful and comfortable. Their evolution had been gentle and cooperative. They had developed technology not through desperate necessity, but through curiosity and leisure. They looked at Earth and saw a primitive world ripe for exploitation. They saw natives who would be easily controlled or relocated. They saw resources waiting to be claimed. They did not see the danger. They did not understand what they had found. They had opened a gateway to hell and mistaken it for paradise. Scout leader Kixval assembled his team on the staging world. 15 scouts, all equipped with environmental suits and translation devices. They carried scanning equipment and what they considered weapons, devices that could stun or paralyze targets from a distance. Kixval briefed his team on the mission. They would go through the gateway, make contact with the local natives, and begin the standard assessment procedures. Biological samples would be taken. The native language would be recorded and analyzed. Social structures would be documented. It was routine work that Kixval had done dozens of times. The scouts stepped through the gateway in single file. The transition was instantaneous. One moment they stood on the purple soil of their staging world under a dim red sun. The next moment they emerged into the bright daylight of Earth, standing in a field of golden wheat under a blue sky. The gravity hit them immediately. Even through their powered suits, they felt heavy and sluggish. The air pressure was higher than they were used to. The oxygen content in the atmosphere, even filtered through their suits, seemed to burn with unnatural intensity. Kixval took a moment to adjust. His suit compensated for the Grav Sheriff Danny Wright had been planning his retirement for months. 2 more weeks, and he would be done with the job. He could finally spend his days fishing and working on his old truck. But when the call came in about strange lights near the Henderson farm, he knew his peaceful day was over. His deputy, Katie Ross, was waiting by the patrol car when he came out of the office. She was young, only 25, but she was sharp and reliable. Danny trusted her completely. They drove out to the Henderson property in silence. The radio chatter had been confusing. Multiple callers reporting a purple glow in the wheat field. Some said it looked like a giant ring. Others claimed they saw figures moving through it. When they arrived, Danny's first thought was that it had to be some kind of prank. But as they got closer, he realized this was no prank. The ring was real. It stood in the middle of the field, humming with energy. Through it, Danny could see what looked like another world, purple sky and strange buildings in the distance. Then the figures started coming through. They were tall and thin, with gray-blue skin and large heads. They wore suits that glowed faintly. Each one carried devices that Danny recognized as weapons, even if they looked like nothing he had seen before. Katie's hand moved to her service weapon, but Danny shook his head. Not yet. First, they needed to understand what was happening. The lead alien approached them. It was taller than the others, maybe 7 feet. A device on its chest crackled and then spoke in broken English. The message was clear enough. The aliens were claiming this world. They wanted humans to submit for processing. The tone was arrogant, dismissive, like they were talking to animals. Danny felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and professional. He told them they were on private property. He asked them to come with him while they sorted this situation out through proper channels. The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter. It waved one long arm dismissively and ordered its team to begin collecting biological samples from the humans. That was when Katie acted. One of the aliens reached for her with what looked like a scanning device. She moved on pure instinct, her training taking over. The baton was in her hand before she even thought about it. She struck the alien's extended arm with controlled force. The sound of breaking bone was loud in the quiet field. The alien screamed, a high-pitched wail that hurt to hear. It collapsed to the ground, clutching its shattered arm. The other aliens froze in shock. Katie stared at her baton in surprise. She had not hit that hard. It should have been a defensive strike, enough to make the alien back off. Instead, she had broken its arm in multiple places like it was made of thin glass. Danny understood immediately. These aliens came from a world with lighter gravity. Their bones were not built for Earth's pull. What seemed like normal strength to Katie was devastating to them. The situation changed fast after that. The aliens raised their weapons. Danny drew his pistol and called for backup on his radio. Katie moved to cover behind their patrol car. The standoff had begun. Within 30 minutes, the field was surrounded. State police arrived first, then county sheriffs from neighboring towns. The National Guard unit, stationed 20 miles away, mobilized and rolled in with armored vehicles. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the Guard unit. He was a solid man in his 40s with 2 combat tours in the Middle East under his belt. He had seen strange things in his career, but nothing like this. Jake set up a perimeter around the gateway. His soldiers took positions with rifles ready. Snipers found elevated positions in trees and on vehicle roofs. He established a command post and tried to open communications with the aliens. The aliens had stopped trying to advance. Several of their scouts were injured now, not from gunfire, but from simple falls and accidents. Earth's gravity was punishing them. Their suits helped, but not enough. They seemed to struggle with every movement. Jake observed them carefully through binoculars. They were clearly distressed. Their leader kept trying to communicate, but the translation device was poor. The message seemed to be a mix of threats and demands for medical assistance. News helicopters began circling overhead. Within hours, the whole world knew about the alien gateway in Montana. Social media exploded with images and videos. Governments scrambled to respond. The president was briefed. The United Nations called an emergency session. But in that wheat field, it was still just Captain Jake Morrison and his guardsmen facing down 15 alien scouts who had badly miscalculated. The aliens sent a message through the gateway. Jake's communications specialist intercepted it. Even without understanding the language, the tone was clear. They were calling for help. On the other side of the gateway, on the Xylothian staging world, Commander Vexenar received the distress call with disbelief. The scouts were trapped. The natives had responded with violence. Several Xylothians were seriously injured. How was this possible? The planet was rated as primitive. The natives should have been terrified and compliant. Instead, they had surrounded the gateway with armed forces and were holding his scouts hostage. Vexnar made a decision. He would send through a larger force, 50 soldiers, properly armed and armored. They would rescue the scouts and establish dominance over the natives. This was a minor setback, nothing more. But first, he needed to understand what had gone wrong. He reviewed the biological data the scouts had managed to collect before the confrontation. What he found disturbed him greatly. The natives were incredibly dense. Their bones were thick and heavy. Their muscle tissue was packed with fibers. Their cardiovascular systems were powerful beyond anything in the Xylothian database. These creatures had evolved under punishing gravity and harsh conditions. The oxygen content in their atmosphere had literally forged them into something stronger and more resilient than any species the Xylothians had encountered. Every breath they took would be toxic to a Xylothian without filtration. Every movement they made was powered by muscles adapted to high gravity. Vexnar began to understand the danger, but he was committed now. The Empire could not show weakness. The gateway would remain open. Forces would be sent through. The natives would be brought under control. He sent orders to Admiral Thexkor, commander of the Xylothian Third Fleet. The situation required a military response. The Admiral would bring ships into orbit above the planet and deliver an ultimatum. The natives would surrender or face bombardment from space. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison received new orders from the Pentagon. Hold position. Do not engage unless attacked. The President herself would be addressing the situation within hours. Jake gathered his officers for a briefing. Lieutenant Amy Foster commanded the infantry platoon. Sergeant Carl Briggs ran the heavy weapons squad. Together they reviewed their defensive positions and rules of engagement. The aliens had not attempted to advance in hours. They seemed content to wait behind their own defensive line near the gateway. Jake suspected they were waiting for reinforcements. Admiral Thexkor commanded 30 warships of the Xylothian Third Fleet. He had fought in 7 campaigns across 4 star systems. To him, this mission seemed simple and almost boring. A primitive world needed to be shown the power of the Empire. He would arrive, make demands, and the natives would surrender. They always did. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The planet Earth appeared on his displays as a blue marble floating in black space. Scans showed thousands of satellites in orbit, which was surprising for a primitive civilization. There were also detected energy signatures that suggested nuclear weapons. Thexkor was not concerned. Nuclear weapons were crude and slow. His ships could destroy them from orbit before they ever launched. He positioned his fleet in a high orbit and activated his communication systems. On Earth, every government received the same message simultaneously. The translation was rough but clear. The Xylothian Empire claimed this world. All military forces would stand down immediately. All weapons would be surrendered. Humanity had one planetary rotation to comply or face orbital strikes on major cities. President Helen Carver sat in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by her advisors. Defense Secretary Greg Palmer looked grim. General Chris Bennett commanded the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the President's science advisor, had been studying footage from Montana for the past 12 hours. Lisa spoke first. She explained what she had learned from analyzing the alien scouts. Their biology was weak by Earth standards. They came from a low-gravity world with a thin atmosphere. Earth's conditions were crushing them. Even with their advanced suits, they struggled to move and function properly. Greg Palmer added military analysis. The alien ships in orbit were dangerous, no question, but their ground forces appeared vulnerable. If humanity could keep the fight on Earth's surface, they might have a chance. General Chris Bennett laid out the hard truth. America alone had 2 million active military personnel and another million in reserve. Worldwide, there were perhaps 20 million trained soldiers. If every nation united against the invasion, they could field an army the likes of which had never been seen. President Helen Carver made her decision quickly. She would not surrender Earth to invaders. She would address the world and call for unity. Every nation would put aside their differences and fight together. This was not about politics or borders anymore. This was about survival. That evening, billions of people watched as their leaders spoke in dozens of languages, but delivered the same message. Earth would resist. Humanity would fight. Admiral Thexkor received the rejection with cold anger. These primitives dared to defy the Empire? He would teach them the price of resistance. He ordered dropships to launch toward major cities on every continent. Ground forces would descend and occupy key locations. The natives would learn fear. The first dropships entered Earth's atmosphere over New York City. They were large craft, each carrying 50 Xylothian soldiers in full combat armor. Their shields were active, their weapons charged. They expected panic in the streets below. Instead, they found Lieutenant Amy Foster and her Marine company waiting in Central Park. Amy had fought in 3 deployments before this. She knew urban combat. She knew how to use terrain and cover. When the dropships landed and aliens poured out, her Marines opened fire from prepared positions. The Xylothian shields held against the first volleys, but Amy had expected that. She signaled her heavy weapons team. Rocket launchers fired from rooftops. The explosions were massive in Earth's thick atmosphere, much larger than they would have been on a Xylothian world. 2 dropships went down immediately, their shields overloaded. The Xylothian soldiers inside stumbled out, disoriented by the crashes. In Earth's gravity, wearing their heavy armor, they could barely move. Amy's Marines rushed forward in a coordinated assault. Close-quarters combat was brutal and one-sided. Human soldiers, adapted to Earth's crushing gravity, moved like lightning compared to the struggling aliens. They fired point-blank into weak points in the armor. They used knives and rifle butts when ammunition ran low. The fight lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 34 Xylothian soldiers were dead or captured. Amy's Marines had taken 6 casualties, none fatal. She reported the results to General Bennett, who immediately distributed the tactical information to military forces worldwide. In Tokyo, the Japanese self-defense forces were already engaging alien dropships using the same tactics. Colonel Ken Hayashi discovered something crucial. The alien energy shields were designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving projectiles. But high-velocity bullets from conventional firearms punched straight through. Ken shared this information on the global military network that had been established within hours of the invasion beginning. Within minutes, every soldier on Earth knew how to fight the aliens effectively. In London, Wing Commander Brandon Cole led RAF fighters against Xylothian atmospheric craft. The alien ships were faster in a straight line, but they could not maneuver in Earth's thick air. Brandon's Typhoon fighters could outturn them at low altitude. Missiles designed for dogfighting proved devastatingly effective. Brandon shot down 3 alien craft in the first engagement. His squadron destroyed 7 more. The debris rained down over the English countryside, and British Army units rushed to secure the crash sites. In Berlin, in Moscow, in Beijing, in Mumbai, in Lagos, in Sao Paulo, the story was the same. Alien forces landed expecting easy victory. They found coordinated military resistance from a species that had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Admiral Thexkor watched his tactical displays with growing horror. Every landing site showed the same pattern: initial contact, brief engagement, then catastrophic losses. His ground forces were being wiped out. The natives were not running in fear. They were hunting his soldiers like prey. He tried orbital bombardment next. Energy beams lanced down from his ships toward military installations on the surface. Some hit their targets. Many were intercepted by surface-to-air missiles that exploded with enough force to disperse the beams. The humans were adapting faster than he could adjust his tactics. Worse, his ships were running low on fuel and ammunition. They had expected a quick operation, not a sustained battle. The logistics of keeping 30 warships in combat readiness above a hostile planet were becoming impossible. On the ground in Montana, Captain Jake Morrison received orders to assault the gateway. Intelligence suggested it was lightly defended now. Most Xylothian forces had been pulled back to defend other positions. Jake assembled his best soldiers. They would go through the gate and see what was on the other side. If they could capture the staging area, they might be able to cut off alien reinforcements entirely. The assault team consisted of 40 National Guard soldiers plus 10 Marines who had been sent to assist. Katie Ross, the deputy who had broken the first alien's arm, volunteered to go. Danny Wright tried to stop her, but she insisted. She had started this fight. She wanted to see it through. They moved on the gateway at dawn. The remaining alien scouts put up minimal resistance. Most were too injured or exhausted to fight effectively. Within minutes, the area was secured. Jake stood before the shimmering portal and looked through to the other side. Purple sky, strange buildings, alien technology. He took a deep breath and stepped through, rifle ready. His soldiers followed. The transition was instantaneous and disorienting. One moment Jake stood in a Montana wheat field under Earth's sun. The next moment he was on an alien world under a red sun, breathing filtered air through his mask. The gravity was lighter here, maybe half of Earth's. Jake felt like he could jump 10 feet straight up. His soldiers spread out, moving with unexpected speed and agility in the low gravity. They were like superheroes suddenly, each one stronger and faster than they had ever been. The Xylothian staging area was not prepared for an attack. Scientists and engineers ran in panic as armed humans emerged from the gateway. A few security guards tried to resist, but they were overwhelmed in seconds. Jake's team secured the facility in under an hour. They captured computers, documents, star charts, and technical equipment. Intelligence officers who had come through with the assault team began analyzing everything immediately. Dr. Lisa Morgan arrived through the gateway 6 hours later with a team of scientists. She began studying the alien technology with fierce intensity. The gateway system was complex, but not impossible to understand. The principles were actually elegant once you grasped the basic concepts. She believed, with enough time and resources, humans could build their own gateways. They could access the entire network the Xylothians had created. The implications were staggering. Admiral Thek's Corps received word that the staging area had fallen. His ground campaign was collapsing. His fleet was running out of supplies. And now the natives had captured critical technology and intelligence. Dr. Nathan Pierce had worked at NASA for 15 years, studying propulsion systems and exotic physics. When the invasion began, he was pulled into a top-secret project at a facility beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. His mission was simple but seemed impossible. Build a gateway from scratch, using what they had learned from the captured Xylothian technology. Nathan had a team of 12 engineers led by Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in quantum mechanics. They also had complete access to the staging area facility in Montana, which was now under heavy military guard and crawling with scientists. The Xylothian gateway technology was advanced, but not magical. It used controlled dimensional folding to create stable wormholes between 2 points in space. The math was complex, but understandable. The real challenge was building the hardware to generate and maintain the necessary energy fields. Nathan and Jennifer worked 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and military rations. They built scale models first, tiny gateways that could connect 2 points in the same room, then larger ones, then one big enough for a person to walk through. On the 4th day, they activated their first full-size gateway in the underground facility. It shimmered to life, and through it they could see the staging area in Montana. The test was successful. Humans had built their first gateway, but Nathan had bigger plans. Using the star charts and network protocols captured from the Xylothians, he believed they could open a gateway to anywhere in the network. They could bypass the staging area entirely and emerge directly in Xylothian territory. General Chris Bennett approved the plan immediately. If they could strike at Xylothian worlds directly, they could end this war quickly. The question was where to strike first. Intelligence officers had been interrogating captured Xylothian soldiers and analyzing seized documents. They identified key targets: industrial worlds where ships and weapons were manufactured, mining colonies that supplied raw materials, research stations developing new technology. The first strike would target a mining colony in the Xylothian home system. It was lightly defended, mostly automated. A small team of Special Forces soldiers could secure it and gather more intelligence about the Empire's structure. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Jackson commanded the Special Forces team selected for the mission. He had 30 operators, all veterans of the hardest fighting Earth had to offer. They trained for 2 days on the captured staging area, getting used to fighting in low-gravity environments while wearing breathing equipment. On the morning of the 6th day of the war, Brad's team stood before the new gateway as Nathan entered coordinates into the control system. The destination was a Xylothian mining world designated Target Alpha, 3 star systems away from Earth. The gateway opened. Through it, Brad could see a rocky landscape under a pale sun. Automated mining machines moved in the distance. No visible guards or defenses. He led his team through. The transition was smoother this time. They emerged on Target Alpha and spread out quickly. The gravity was even lighter than the staging area, maybe a third of Earth's. Brad felt like he could leap over buildings. His team moved like ghosts, covering ground impossibly fast. The mining facility had a small crew of Xylothian overseers and technicians. They were completely unprepared for armed humans appearing out of nowhere. Most surrendered immediately when Brad's team entered their control center. A few tried to flee but were caught easily. Brad secured the facility and signaled back to Earth. The mission was a complete success. They had captured an entire mining operation without firing a shot. More importantly, they had proven that human-built gateways could access the Xylothian network anywhere. Intelligence teams came through the gateway and began downloading data from the mining facility computers. They found detailed maps of the entire Xylothian Empire. 47 star systems, hundreds of colonies and outposts, and coordinates for all of them. General Bennett looked at the maps and saw opportunity. The Xylothian Empire was vast but spread thin. Most of their military power was concentrated around their core worlds. The colonies were barely defended. They had never needed heavy defenses because the gateway network was supposed to be secure. But now humans had access to that network, and humans had proven they could fight effectively in low-gravity environments. Every Xylothian world was easier to operate on than Earth. Every Xylothian soldier was weaker than a human in equal conditions. Bennett gave the order: launch simultaneous strikes on 20 Xylothian targets, industrial centers, research facilities, military bases. Hit them hard and fast before they could react. Over the next 3 days, human forces emerged from gateways across the Xylothian Empire. Marine units seized weapons factories on industrial worlds. Army Rangers captured research stations and seized experimental technology. Navy Special Warfare teams secured orbital platforms and disabled defensive systems. The Xylothians had never experienced anything like this. Warfare in their empire had always been slow and predictable. Fleets maneuvered for position, negotiations happened, battles were fought according to established protocols. But humans did not follow any protocols. They appeared without warning, struck with overwhelming force, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Colonel Ryan Murphy commanded the 3rd Armored Division, which had been moved to Montana to defend the original gateway. When Xylothian forces tried to send reinforcements through from their side, Ryan was ready. The aliens had no idea the gateway was now a trap. They sent wave after wave of soldiers through, expecting to reinforce their beleaguered forces. Instead, they emerged directly into a prepared kill zone. Artillery had been pre-positioned to fire on the gateway exit point. Tanks had clear lines of fire. Infantry waited in hardened positions. The slaughter was terrible and one-sided. Xylothian soldiers stumbled through the gateway into Earth's crushing gravity and immediately came under fire from every direction. They could not retreat back through the gate. They could not advance against the prepared defenses. They died in their hundreds. After 6 hours, the Xylothians tried to close the gateway from their side. But human engineers had figured out how to jam the control systems. The gate stayed open. More aliens were forced through by commanders who did not understand what was happening on the other side. Corporal Nicole Bennett was part of the first squad to go through the captured Montana Gateway in the reverse direction when the fighting finally stopped. She was Katie Ross's cousin, and she wanted revenge for the invasion of her home state. Nicole and her squad emerged in the Xylothian facility on the other side and found chaos. Dead soldiers everywhere, panicking civilians, officers trying to coordinate a defense that was already collapsing. The humans swept through the facility like a storm. In the low gravity, wearing their combat gear, they were unstoppable. Nicole personally captured a Xylothian general who had been coordinating the reinforcement effort. The intelligence value was enormous. Dr. Nathan Pierce continued his work building more gateways. Within a week of the invasion starting, Earth had 20 operational gateways. Within 2 weeks, they had 50. Each one could be programmed to open anywhere in the Xylothian network. The strategic implications were revolutionary. Earth did not need faster-than-light ships anymore. They did not need to spend years or decades traveling between stars. They could be anywhere in the galaxy instantly. The Xylothians had given humanity the keys to the entire empire. Admiral Thexkor sat in his command chair aboard his flagship and watched his empire crumble on the tactical displays. Every world was reporting human attacks. His fleet above Earth was running out of supplies and ammunition. His ground forces were either destroyed or captured. The staging area was lost. The gateway network was compromised. He sent a message to the Grand Council requesting permission to withdraw. The response came back quickly. No retreat. The Empire could not show weakness. More forces would be sent. This war would be won. But Thexkor knew the truth. This war was already lost. The humans had turned the Empire's own technology against them. They had proven superior in ground combat. They adapted faster than any species he had ever encountered. And they showed no signs of stopping. On Earth, President Helen Carver met with her military commanders and intelligence chiefs. The reports were almost unbelievable. In less than 2 weeks, humanity had gone from defending against invasion to launching offensive operations across multiple star systems. They had captured dozens of Xylothian facilities. They had seized enough technology to leap forward centuries in their own development. But the war was not over yet. The Xylothian homeworlds were still heavily defended. Their core fleet had not been engaged, and the Grand Council was sending desperate orders to continue the fight. Helen knew what had to be done. The war needed to end decisively and quickly. The longer it dragged on, the more lives would be lost on both sides. She gave General Bennett authorization for the final phase. Operation Checkmate would strike at the heart of the Xylothian Empire. Multiple human forces would emerge from gateways directly on the Xylothian homeworld, not to destroy the planet or kill civilians, but to force an immediate surrender by making it clear that resistance was futile. Brad Jackson's Special Forces team would lead the assault. Their objective was Admiral Thexkor stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the message from his home world. Human soldiers had taken the Grand Council chambers. The council itself was being held under guard. The capital city was in chaos. His own world, the heart of the Xylothian Empire, had fallen to invaders in less than 3 hours. The war had lasted 18 days total. 18 days since the gateway opened in Montana. In that time, the Xylothian Empire had been torn apart by a species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. Thexkor sent the surrender order to all Xylothian forces. He had no choice. Continuing to fight would only lead to more deaths and more destruction. The humans had proven their point. They were not going to be conquered. They were not going to be relocated. They were going to win this war completely. On Earth, President Helen Carver received the surrender notification. She felt relief wash over her. The fighting would stop. Her people would be safe, but she also felt something else. a sense of responsibility. Humanity now held the fate of an entire alien empire in its hands. What they did next would define their place in the galaxy. She assembled her team for a final strategy session. Defense Secretary Greg Palmer argued for harsh terms. The Xylothians had invaded Earth without provocation. They had tried to enslave humanity. They deserved punishment. But Dr. Lisa Morgan offered a different perspective. The Xylothians had made a terrible mistake, yes, but they were not evil. They simply had not understood what they were dealing with. Their entire empire was built on peaceful expansion and easy conquests. They had never encountered real resistance before. General Chris Bennett suggested a middle path. Accept the surrender, but make the terms clear. The Xylothians would share all their technology with Earth. They would pay reparations. Their military would be reduced. And human observers would ensure compliance. Helen agreed with this approach. She would be firm, but not cruel. The goal was lasting peace, not revenge. The peace negotiations took place on neutral ground, aboard a space station that the Xylothians had built between star systems. President Helen Carver led the human delegation. The Xylothian Grand Council sent representatives, though they were clearly terrified. Helen spoke plainly. She explained that humans did not want to destroy the Xylothian Empire. They wanted peaceful relations between species. But Earth would never again be threatened or dismissed as primitive. The terms of surrender were presented. First, all gateway technology would be shared completely with Earth. Humans would have full access to the network. Second, the Xylothians would pay reparations in technology and resources for 10 years. Third, the Xylothian military would be reduced to defensive forces only. Fourth, human observers would be stationed on key Xylothian worlds to ensure compliance with the treaty. The Xylothian representatives had no leverage to negotiate. They accepted every term. The treaty was signed on the 20th day after the invasion began. Back on Earth, celebrations erupted in every city. Humanity had faced an alien invasion and not just survived, but won decisively. It was a moment of unity, unlike anything in human history. Every nation, every culture had come together to defend their home world. But some people understood that the real work was just beginning. Dr. Nathan Pierce led a massive technology transfer program. Xylothian scientists came to Earth to teach humans about advanced physics, energy systems, materials science, and biotechnology. In return, human scientists shared what they had learned about adapting to diverse environments and pushing biological limits. The cultural exchange was even more significant. Xylothians slowly began to understand what made humans different. They learned about Earth's harsh history, the ice ages, and asteroid impacts and mass extinctions. They learned how humanity had evolved through constant struggle and competition. They learned why humans fought so fiercely and adapted so quickly. And humans learned about the wider galaxy. There were hundreds of intelligent species out there. Most were peaceful and advanced like the Xylothians. Very few had evolved on Deathworlds like Earth. Humanity was unique, a species forged by the harshest conditions imaginable. Katie Ross became a national hero. The deputy who had struck the first blow against the invasion was celebrated everywhere. She was offered promotions, jobs in government, positions with private companies. She turned them all down and went back to being a deputy in Montana. But she did accept an appointment to the new Interspecies Relations Council. Sheriff Danny Wright finally got his retirement. He spent his days fishing and working on his truck, just like he had planned. But sometimes he would drive out to the wheat field where it all started. The original gateway had been moved to a secure facility, but a monument stood in its place now. People came from all over the world to see where humanity had first encountered alien life. Captain Jake Morrison was promoted to colonel and put in charge of training human forces for low-gravity combat operations. His National Guard unit had been the first to fight the aliens. Now they were teaching others how to operate in the diverse environments of the galaxy. Lieutenant Amy Foster received the Medal of Honor for her actions in New York. She continued to serve in the Marines and eventually commanded human forces stationed on Xylothian worlds as part of the peace observation mission. Dr. Lisa Morgan became the director of the new Office of Alien Affairs. Her job was to manage Earth's relationships with the Xylothian Empire and any other alien species they might encounter. It was challenging work, but she loved it. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Jackson and his Special Forces team were awarded the highest military honors from multiple countries. They had led the assault on the Xylothian capital and forced the surrender. Brad retired from active service and wrote a book about his experiences that became required reading at military academies worldwide. Admiral Thexkor faced a military tribunal on his home world, but the charges were eventually dropped. He had followed orders and done his duty. The real failure belonged to the Grand Council and the intelligence services that had so badly misjudged Earth. Thexkor retired from military service and spent his remaining years teaching at a university, warning young Xylothians about the dangers of underestimating other species. Within a year of the treaty signing, Earth had established colonies on 15 different worlds accessed through the Gateway Network. These were not conquests. They were legitimate settlements on unclaimed worlds. But the speed of expansion alarmed some Xylothian observers. A delegation came to Earth to express concern. President Helen Carver met with them personally. She explained that humans were not trying to build an empire like the Xylothians had. They were simply exploring and settling. The same drive that had pushed humanity across Earth thousands of years ago. But she promised that human expansion would be responsible and respectful of other species. The Xylothians relaxed somewhat. As they watched humans interact with other alien species over the following years, they saw that humans were capable of both fierce violence and genuine compassion. Humans could be dangerous enemies but loyal friends. Trade routes opened between Earth and Xylothian worlds. Cultural exchanges increased. Young Xylothians came to Earth universities to study human history and biology. Young humans traveled to Xylothian worlds to learn alien sciences and arts. 5 years after the invasion, the two species were not just at peace. They were allies. When a new threat emerged in a distant part of the galaxy, human and Xylothian forces fought side by side to contain it. The experience of fighting together built trust and mutual respect. 10 years after the invasion, Earth was a major power in the galaxy. Human colonies numbered in the hundreds. Human technology had advanced by leaps and bounds. Human culture had spread to dozens of worlds. And humanity's reputation as a dangerous but honorable species was firmly established. Other alien civilizations learned from the Xylothian mistake. They approached Earth with respect and caution. They understood that humans came from a death world and were not to be underestimated. Most sought peaceful relations and trade agreements. A few hostile species tested human defenses over the years. They all learned the same lesson the Xylothians had learned. Humans could be beaten in space combat. Their ships were not the fastest or most advanced, but if you fought them on the ground, especially on high-gravity worlds or in harsh environments, humans were nearly unstoppable. The term Deathworlder became common in galactic society. It referred to the handful of species that had evolved on the hardest, most dangerous planets. Humans were the most successful Deathworlder species ever encountered. Their combination of intelligence, adaptability, and physical capability made them unique. Back on Earth, in that wheat field in Montana, the memorial park had grown over the years. It included a museum now, telling the story of first contact and the 18-day war. Children on school trips came to learn about the day humanity met alien life and proved it would not be conquered. An inscription on the main monument read simply, "They opened a gateway to our world thinking we were weak. They learned that Earth creates survivors, not victims." Danny Wright visited the memorial on the 20th anniversary of First Contact. He was an old man now, but he still remembered every detail of that day. Katie Ross was there too, now a senator and a grandmother. They stood together and watched families walking through the museum. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had surrendered?" Katie asked. Danny shook his head. "Humans don't surrender. Not in our nature. We're too stubborn." Katie smiled. "Too stubborn and too strong. They really picked the wrong planet to invade." "Yes, they did," Danny agreed. "But in a weird way, they did us a favor. They gave us the stars. Without that gateway opening, we might have taken another 100 years to reach other worlds on our own." All around Earth and across the colonies, humanity continued to grow and thrive. The species that had evolved in the harshest conditions imaginable had been given access to the galaxy. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Xylothians had opened a gate to a death world and met humanity. Their mistake had been fatal to their empire, but ultimately beneficial to both species. From conflict had come understanding, from war had come peace, and from first contact had come a new era for all intelligent life in the galaxy. Humanity had proven it belonged among the stars, not as conquerors, but as explorers and survivors, not as victims, but as equals. The children of Earth, forged in fire and gravity and struggle, had claimed their place in the cosmos, and they were just getting started. Grand Council chambers in the capital city. They would secure the building and hold it until the Xylothian government agreed to negotiate. It was a bold plan. It was also extremely dangerous. But Brad's team had proven they could handle any challenge the Xylothians threw at them, and time was running out. Every day the war continued, more people died. The gateway opened in a park in the center of the Xylothian capital. Brad led his team through and immediately secured the area. Xylothian civilians ran in panic, but none tried to fight. They could see the humans were not here to hurt them. The team moved quickly through the city streets toward the government complex. Xylothian security forces tried to set up defensive positions, but they were too slow and too weak. Human soldiers in Earth-standard gear moved like superpowered beings in the light gravity. Within 2 hours, Brad's team had secured the Grand Council chambers. Inside, the council members themselves huddled in fear. They had never expected to see enemy soldiers in their own capital, in their own building. Brad established communication with Admiral Thexcor and transmitted a simple message. "Surrender now or watch your entire empire fall piece by piece." He sent an urgent message to the Xylothian Grand Council. This was not a simple pacification operation anymore. This was a war against a species the Empire had never encountered before, a species adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most civilized beings, a species that fought with a ferocity and coordination that seemed impossible. The Grand Council received his message with shock. How could a primitive world resist the might of the Empire? They ordered Thexcor to continue the assault. They would send reinforcements. They would commit more ships and soldiers. This world would be conquered. But as President Helen Carver addressed her military commanders, she knew something the Xylothians did not. Humanity was just getting started. Every hour, human forces were learning more about alien technology. Every engagement brought new tactical innovations. Every victory made them bolder. The aliens had opened a door expecting to find a primitive world ready for conquest. Instead, they had released something they could not control. They had given Earth access to the stars. And humanity, forged in the fires of a death world, was ready to take full advantage. He was right. Within the next day, either more aliens would come through that gate or ships would appear in orbit. Either way, humanity was about to face its first real test against an alien civilization. Danny Wright stood at the perimeter with a cup of bad coffee and watched the gateway shimmer in the darkness. Katie was catching some sleep in one of the guard vehicles. All around them, soldiers waited with weapons ready. The sheriff thought about retirement. He thought about the peaceful life he had planned. He thought about how everything had changed in a single afternoon. Then he thought about the alien he had seen Katie hit, how easily it had broken, how weak it had seemed despite its advanced technology. These aliens had made a terrible mistake coming to Earth. They had expected to find weak primitives ready to submit. Instead, they had found humanity. And humanity did not submit, not to invaders, not to anyone. Danny smiled grimly and took another sip of coffee. This was going to be interesting. But movement still felt difficult. He activated his scanner and looked around. The wheat field stretched in all directions. In the distance, he could see structures that must be native dwellings. A primitive road cut through the landscape. Then he saw movement. A vehicle was approaching, kicking up dust on the dirt road. It was crude and mechanical, burning some kind of chemical fuel. HFY signaled his team to stand ready. This would be their first contact with the natives of this world. The vehicle stopped near the gateway. Two figures emerged. They were small by Xylothian standards, barely reaching 2 meters in height. They wore simple clothing and carried primitive communication devices. One was male, older with gray in his hair. The other was female, younger and alert. HFY activated his translation device and stepped forward. Through crackling audio, he announced the presence of the Xylothian Empire and demanded the natives submit to processing for assessment and potential relocation. He expected fear or confusion. He expected the natives to be awed by superior beings from the stars. What he got instead would change everything.